What is up, everyone? My name is Brandon Iverson, and welcome to the Community Managers Podcast. And we have a special one today. We have our very first guest on the show. I'll be welcoming Hagen onto the show. He is the community manager over at Autodesk in their media and entertainment division. And we had a super fun, engaging conversation. He brought great energy, and we talked about how AI is obviously changing the world, but how is it changing his world in the media and entertainment space? We talk about how he nurtures his relationships in communities and how it's important to be authentic and not treat people or humans as metrics. So can't spoil everything. You just have to stay tuned and listen all the way through. But before you do, make sure you like and subscribe if you're watching on YouTube. Check out the Apple Podcasts or Spotify platforms for the audio only versions. And if you want more insights, I have a newsletter that you can subscribe to at the communitymanagerspodcast.com. But without further ado, let's jump right into it. How you doing, man?
Hey, thanks for having me. I was excited that you reached out. I've never done anything like this before.
Yeah, this is my first time having a guest on the podcast, so we're both learning and enjoying the conversation together. So I'm excited to dive right in. So actually, the first thing before we even get started, have the audience get to know you, who you are, how did you get into the community management world? Because I know there's a lot more to you than just community management. Let's give a Cliff Notes version of who you are.
Yeah. Well, as Brandon said, I'm Hagen. I live here in Portland, Oregon, and I've been with Autodesk, I think, for almost 7 years. It might be just over 7 now. And I definitely didn't see a career path in community. It just I fell into it. So before Autodesk, I was a freelance contractor for games and all things creative. So I'd spent about 10 years, 10 plus years in those industries. So I went from like logo design, storefront rendering in 3D, all the way to like illustration and background design for video games. So it really was a diverse 10 years. Yeah, I fell into Autodesk, working at Autodesk because of replying to LinkedIn. So I feel like I have a really good track record of LinkedIn messages because that's where Brandon reached out about this. And yeah, just one day I was like, man, I'm getting better at the work, but my tolerance for the hustle just was going down and down. So I started at Autodesk in technical support because I knew both 3ds Max and Maya, and got my foot in the door here and started doing technical support. And soon after, I was kind of like, the first couple months of a job, you're like, well, I don't know what this company is all about, but I'm just going to like do stuff. And if nobody stops me,
Right.
it's chill. So I started hosting these events at the Portland office.
Oh,
And
wow.
I did a couple of years running like customer showcases, that kind of stuff, like inviting folks in and talk about their workflows and such. So then it evolved, and my former boss, Amanda, she was in marketing and she was helping me out with these events. And she was like, over the years, she was like, look, Hagen, I'm going to go out on maternity leave and I need somebody to help out while I'm gone. So
Right.
her boss, April, was like, interviewed me, and, we just ended up going for it. I had no background in community management whatsoever. And we just took
Wow.
the dive, and I had no background in marketing, and community now sits within marketing at Autodesk. So, the rest is history. I've been doing the job for, oh gosh, maybe 3 years now, and no looking back. I do not miss the technical support days. Yeah, I absolutely love it here at Autodesk. They treat me really well, and I get to in turn engage with our really highly active community on our ecosystem and off of our platforms in social sometimes and beyond. So
That's awesome. That's awesome. And it's cool. Let's go back a little bit to what you said previously. You worked in Maya, you were working using Autodesk products, and now you're working at the actual company. And if I'm not mistaken, you worked, like you just said, in gaming. Can you talk about your experience there and transitioning from producing your own games and animation to what you're doing now? Can you talk about that a little bit?
yeah, yeah, I can. Working here at a 20,000 plus company, people,
Yeah.
it's like bonkers because before that I was working with teams under 10 people.
Wow.
So very
Do you see, like,
jarring.
a big difference with that? Like, in
Oh
terms
God,
of, small to big team, do you prefer, like, bigger communities versus smaller, or is there drawbacks or pros or cons to that?
gosh, that's a good question. Let's circle back on that because
Okay,
I
yeah.
think like a lot of the stuff that I do now, I couldn't do if I wasn't a software user before and in the community before, or at least as well as I can now. Because a lot of the conversations that I am having with our the folks that we cater to, customers and creative communities, I mean, they're my people. Like I know how to connect with them because I am them, right? You got to be real because when we're bombarded with just, marketing, 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 sometimes it kind of you don't feel like a person. Like you're not being talked to like a person, you're being talked to like a dollar sign. And like
100%.
that's something that you got to really cut out when you're talking with community. Because I mean, they're real people because they're you. Like and that's what really resonated with me is the ethos behind the community team here at Autodesk is really that and really connecting with the end users, whether they be like, you know, purchasing 20 to 100 seats of our products
Wow.
for, Disney or, other big name customers, or, a single seat user that's just dabbling and making their own game in their off time, or, working in 3ds Max to make, train sets or something just because that's their
Mm.
hobby. And it's like that full spectrum. So it's huge. It's a huge group of people that we cater to. And it's really great because then it's the huge diversity of conversations that I'm having with folks.
I love that. I love that. I actually wanna go back to that as well as we dive more into your role and what you're doing on the community management side, but I remember something you said earlier talking about, you just basically the philosophy of asking for permission later. You started spinning up events at the company, and there's probably a lot of people out there, whether they're a community manager or not, that are afraid to go outside of their zone or their scope of their role. So talk about the importance of utilizing all of your talents. You're obviously a people person, you're authentic, you're creative, and people sometimes are afraid in their bubble or their box, whatever you want to call it, at their job, at their company, to go beyond their scope. So can you talk more about what prompted you to do that? How important it is to take risks, so to speak, on that front?
Yeah. And I think it actually goes back to your previous question, which is what it's like to be at a company of this size versus smaller team. So it's
Mhm.
actually more comparable than I thought it would be Bec-
Okay.
because so much stuff slips through the cracks when you're at a big company. And
Mhm.
like, it's honestly too much. So it does allow me to wear many hats and take on roles and responsibilities that I normally wouldn't think I would have at a larger company. So, for example, marketing graphics, a lot of times we just don't engage with brand and we just do it on our own, small and scrappy that way. Sometimes with video editing, you kind of name it. Like it's across the board. If we need something, we figure out how we can get it. But yeah, I do enjoy the autonomy that I'm given at Autodesk. It's a lot of trust. It's a high trust role because, you know, when you're out there engaging with folks, there isn't a script, right? I didn't even go to anybody at Autodesk and be like, "Hey, by the way, I need to be written a script for this." There was no talking points or anything. I was just like, "Hey, I'm
Yeah,
doing this." Um, so it goes back to the kind of like ask for forgiveness, not permission.
later. Exactly, exactly. No, I love that, and it's good that you're at a company and in a space that gives you the resources to do that, which is pretty cool, which we'll dive more into as well. But again, going back to what you said earlier, especially with community building, you don't wanna treat people like they're a dollar sign, because you are those people. You use those products, what their mind frame is. And I know you work in the creator program at Autodesk, which I'm sure you can talk more about, but I know you focus, like, on authenticity, like, authentic learning content. So, like, how would you define authentic in this context? Like, how does it influence your content strategy and being authentic with the users that you interface with on a day-to-day basis?
Yeah. I think it's a lot of listening,
Mhm.
and I mean that in a lot of different ways, but really just kind of tapping in and being part of the community and saying, okay, well, what's top of mind for them? Kind of doing a little bit of mind reading, so to speak, just trying to get out ahead of like, okay, not just what conversations and what conversations folks are having in the industry, but also like what predicaments are they what problems are they trying to solve? And how can we better enable them to solve those problems? So, since we're working with a software and it's creative software, like, and technical, highly technical, the learning curve is somewhat high.
See,
Yeah. But, I think that actually is one really big one. The learning curve, learning
yeah.
material and education is really high priority for us, as well as just making sure that folks stay on time with their scope of their projects. So a lot of times, we're talking about optimizing scenes, we're talking about workflows, you know, it's all across the board. I think that we're on a podcast. We have to talk about AI at some point, right? I think
I have that question ready to go. You're already ahead of me, but we
that's
can talk
already
about it.
how
Yeah.
about being in entertainment specifically, with the writer strikes and the actor strikes and everything, that really, really impacted a lot of Autodesk customers and obviously Autodesk as well. So like, it's a holistic conversation.
Let's not waste any time. We can talk more about the media and entertainment field that you're in, the creator program, but you segued into AI. I was actually perusing the Autodesk site yesterday, just looking at some of the things the topics that the community is talking about, and a big one is AI. Can you talk more about like how do you think AI tools like Autodesk generative AI features will impact community management? But not just community management, but just being a creator in the media entertainment space, outside of that space, what do you think the overall impact would be on the community management side as well as from a creative standpoint as well when you're looking at it on the flip side?
Yeah. So I did not get brain training in any way. So I am going to refer back to something that I read on our side, which is it's AI is always like a how, not a why or a what we're doing. It's never like the reason we do something. It's always a means to an end. It's always a tool. So I think that really resonated with me when I saw our Autodesk messaging around, the tools that we're working on right now. And to be clear, Autodesk doesn't have anything forefront AI like tools specifically as the like
Native.
we've launched a few things in products that
Okay.
we already have. So a good example of that is Flow, generative scheduling, something that the team's been hard at work at. So that's more of like a task management style software. There are some things, you know, in the works behind closed doors around more of a creative process, but nothing to
Okay.
speak of right now. But I think that as far as like how it's impacting the community, from an illustrator's point of view, actually, it's been really it's been really rough to watch the creative industries have this kind of I would call it growing pains. I'm not an all in like AI art person, but I'm not like poo pooing it either. I don't think I think there's a place for any tool, but I
That's
also
true.
think that it's so important to keep your eye on what's important, which is humans. And if it can enable a human to do something in a more collaborative way, in a more positive way, then there's a place for it. So I think
Of
the
course.
illustration point of view, people are getting ripped off, right? Like it's
Yeah.
where this data has been scraped and is being scraped and who is actually, getting paid for that. That's really unfortunate. I feel like, those companies might have gotten a little bit ahead of themselves. Not naming names though.
Right.
On the other side of that, I think that it's been interesting to watch the creative process kind of iterate. And, a lot of concept artists are using AI to in
Yeah.
their workflows now. And it really does speak to the kind of higher demand of the entertainment industry these days. So companies are asking a lot more of their creative teams and they're asking for it in a more tight timeline. So that's a
Right.
lot. a lot of
Right.
stress and a lot of expectation. So making sure that, as a community manager, for
Mm.
me, I want to be very aware of that. I want to be very conscientious of people and putting their health and wellness above all of these conversations and their livelihoods. If you have
100%.
folks making money off
Yeah.
the backs of artists that have basically learned their craft over so many years, and then they turn around and get scraped off of this data, and they're not getting any compensation. That's not cool. But it's an evolving thing, just like all technology is. So hopefully, rail guards and safeguards are coming, and will start to rein it in a little bit.
Yeah, we're so early on AI right now, even though it feels like we're not. It feels like it's among us. We've already seen the applications. You just did a great breakdown of what you're seeing from your POV. But what industries, typically in your niche, the media entertainment space, which industries or which subsects of your industry, I should say, will be impacted the most as years go on? You talked about with the strikes and in the movie industry, television, the list goes on in animation as well. I see the utility, like you just said, of AI, whether it be productivity or just using it as a tool versus to replace a human outright. Because I really don't think you can do that on the creative side, especially. But as it continues to get smarter, evolve, more corporations continue to adopt it and want to utilize it. In your POV, like which subsects of your industry do you think will be impacted the most? And will it be positive? Will it be negative? Do you have thoughts on that?
No, yeah, I do. I think it's a little bit interesting because my heart is with the game development community, and it always will be. Like I make games in my spare time, and spent years cultivating friendships and stuff there. So I think it's going to be company to company. I don't think that there's actually any industry that's going to get hit harder than the other. I think it depends on what CEOs lean the hardest in, and what platforms they introduce to their ecosystem, whether that be internally or externally. And I know that kind of sounds like a vague statement, but I think you get what I mean.
No,
Um,
I understand. Yeah.
and I think it's all about buy-in, and I think that patience is an important virtue, especially in this case. And I think that deliberate as a company and a single contributor perspective, I think being very deliberate with the ways we introduce AI into the conversation, whether that deal with this social body copy, or like saying, I'm a game designer and I'm going to start implementing this AI writing tool for this branching narrative. Because I think that that's the most exciting part is the most scary part. And that's why we have the strikes happening, is
Right.
because, it started with writers. And of course, everybody talks in Hollywood and in the game industry and everything, and it's smaller than you think. And I think that that's a lot of fear. Like the SAG after it joined because they were like, wait a second, like you have folks like Keanu Reeves being literally digitally scanned by, Epic. And, great. I don't know what the details of that agreement were, but when you see that kind of stuff as a up and coming artist and or actor in Hollywood and the world, you have to wonder, you have to be like, oh, okay, am I getting into the right industry? Like, how can you compete with with a Keanu Reeves that's digital and lives forever? Like,
Yeah.
how can you do that?
You can't. That's the answer. Yeah. You broke that down in a great way because you talked about it being frightening as well as exciting at the same time. So, like, what are those exciting things? Before we move on, we could talk about AI all day, but what are those exciting things? Because I think about animation teams, for example, working on a movie or working for a Marvel movie. We've heard stories about animators not being treated fairly because of tight timelines. Marvel movies, they're pumping out those things 3 or 4 times a year, so I'm sure that's a big lift, and they need a lot of work done in a condensed amount of time. With the advent of AI, does that help improve workflows? Does that cut that time period down to where now those things are manageable for VFX and animators in that kind of world? What are some of those exciting things where you're like, okay, if we can manage this in some form or fashion where it's ethical and it's actually used in a beneficial way to help everyone's life, is there utility there? So, you have any thoughts on that?
I do, and they're my personal thoughts, not the thoughts of my company.
Of course.
I just want to throw that in there. But yeah, I think that there is some really exciting applications. I think that again, like I said, my heart is games. So, whether that be like a branching narrative writing system, dynamic animation, even like I saw, I can't remember the name of the company, but I think it was Cyberpunk 2077. CD Project Red, they implemented this really interesting system for localization, and their animation team used a proprietary AI system to help automate the animation process. Because, I mean,
Wow.
like lip syncing is really hard, right? When you're
Yeah.
animating, it's such a nuanced thing. And especially with a high fidelity game like Cyberpunk, like they're capturing actors' nuances. Reference Keanu Reeves. Again, oh no,
There you go.
but again, like you're paying out of pocket for these things. You're getting, hopefully you're getting funding for some of these things, but that's all a cost. And you want to pay people down the chain to make sure that, everybody gets treated fairly. And if localization is on your wheelhouse, if you spend a bunch of money on voice acting, you got to make sure that the translation it's capturing the actors' nuances. So like
True.
that's the example of exciting to me. But
Mhm.
if you think about it, then that does take an animator's time out of the equation.
Very true.
So being very thoughtful in whatever capacity we are when we're implementing AI systems, I think is just super important.
100%, 100%, and I appreciate that breakdown. I'm sure a lot of people will as well. There's no I don't at least right now, we haven't seen it. There's no catch-all solution for AI where it's foolproof and it works perfectly because we've seen it work both ways, exciting and frightening and in between. But yeah, that's going to be a continuous topic of conversation, even more as the technology continues to evolve and continue to get smarter. Circling back real quick, we got away from your journey to Autodesk. So going back to that, you created events, you now become the community manager because of not asking for permission, but asking for forgiveness using that philosophy. And now you're the community manager. Got talk about, and you alluded to it earlier, how do you balance supporting professional artists? You're someone who's, I would say, a professional artist even before going to Autodesk. Professional artists using Maya or 3ds Max versus balancing newcomers just entering the 3D space. So how do you nurture those relationships in your different forums or however you communicate to your community? What does that look like for you on a day to day?
Increasingly more face to face, whether
Mm,
that be digitally or otherwise. And I think that if you would have asked me even 3 years ago, I would not have. I mean, height of the pandemic, but if it was past me, I wouldn't say that. I was an artist in the corner just doodling, and I think the value of the face to face is so incredibly important. And, that takes a lot of different forms. This is a good example. Doing out a podcast, I never would have thought I would do something like this. But also, students connecting with them. I was just at a digital talk with SCAD, Savannah College of Art and Design. We have a new student ambassador program that one of our education departments is kicking off and has been for this past year. And just leaning into that relationship internally, they invited me to go talk to SCAD students, and it was so delightful. It was
it's awesome.
2 hours. We did 1 hour of like talking about career development and stories from production and everything. And then we did a Q&A after that. And then after that, we did a full hour of portfolio reviews. And I think we must have had like 60, 70 folks in the auditorium. And I had
Wow.
never done anything like that. And then on top of it, it was remote, right? I was like, we were on the big screen. I'll send you a picture afterwards. But we
Okay.
were on big screen in their auditorium, and it's like me and my friend Jordan, and she's just like, we're like giving thumbs up on this Twitter.
To all these kids,
Yeah,
all these
it was,
students.
I'm on the forums. I'm on the Autodesk forums. I'm
Okay.
on Discord. I'm I thankfully don't have to handle social anymore. I that's a whole
Uh,
nother beast, but I
yeah.
did for a couple years, do some social strategy, and that was like it was some YouTube, but mostly X and Facebook before we divested, and then LinkedIn. And now that is handled by another team,
Okay.
thankfully. But
Well,
yeah,
I can see your reaction before you go on. Why don't you like, or why are you happy to not be in social anymore? Do you have a couple of reasons why?
I just don't think that that was my wheelhouse. I never enjoyed it as a content creator myself. I got
Mhm.
somewhat big on Instagram, and while I did enjoy the platform as far as like connecting with my peers and fans, so to speak, it's just it quickly can become addicting. It can become
Yeah,
a drag. It can become all sorts of things that you don't need in your life. Um,
100%.
so, and I think that overall, especially, the pandemic really heightened it, I'm sure, for a lot of folks, but social media exhaustion is so real.
It
So
is.
like, when you're on your phone scrolling through your personal and then having to switch over to professional, it's like, where do I begin and where does this end?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. That's something that I struggle with as well. Even just building a podcast, trying to promote it on different platforms, you get sucked into it. I think a big thing, especially on social media, is the whole comparison factor, right? Comparing yourself
Mhm.
to others, and even though you might have milestones for yourself as a creator, and I try to only use social media as a tool. Okay, I consciously just try to tell myself if I'm going on LinkedIn, if I'm going on Twitter, I'm going on Instagram, what am I using it for? Is it just a dopamine hit? Or is it because, oh, I want to reach out to this person, or I'm trying to learn this or reach out to this? So whenever I consciously do that, I find myself scrolling less and using it for the purposes that I'm supposed to be using it for. But
I love
yeah, if
that.
you don't have that mindset, then it's very easy to have see negative effects in your daily life when you overuse it and use it for purposes that don't benefit you as an individual.
Wait, on
It
that
def-
note, something that I do think about a lot is, well, our ethos at Autodesk, specifically in marketing and community, is holding up the artists that are using our products because that's the best marketing. Like that's the most authentic. That's like saying, "Hey, look at this cool thing over here. We helped somewhere down the path of this creation," and holding those folks up. So along that line, a lot of what I do is looking. I look for
Mhm.
folks. And that is kind of the hard part is like now I'm on Discord and it's a lot easier because then I can just talk to the people right
Yeah.
directly. I'm not having to go into DMs and everything. It's all just kind of like right there. I'm actually interested in YouTube's new community tools. I don't know what that's going to look like, but I heard that they're going to roll out some stuff, and that's really interesting. I'm excited to actually see if you do it.
Yeah, I'm excited as well. I'm excited as well. I'm looking out for that too. And you actually prompted a good question, like how important is platform when building a community? I see. I think I saw a stat on Twitter actually that Slack is like the most used community platform or most preferred platform to build community. And I think it's Facebook groups, and then Discord's like third or fourth. You alluded to it, talking about how Discord, you had that one-on-one conversation with people versus DMs. But how have you enjoyed using Discord or any other forums that you may use when connecting with community members?
I like it.
Mm,
It is different. I mean, every platform is different, and I think one of your questions being how important is platform? I think it's just another tool, right? Like
yeah,
go to where the people are. And that's I think a common refrain that I even had here in internal Autodesk conversations is just like, look, we're a software company, we're not a platform company.
mhm,
And expecting people to come to us on our forums, that's just not realistic sometimes. The people are out there using Facebook, they're using Twitter, they're using, or excuse me, X, they're using Discord. And why aren't we there? Or why aren't we engaging with them in certain ways on these platforms? So a lot of my work that I have been doing is kind of these like kind of back channels. So to answer the other question, which is how do I like Discord? It's different. I
Yeah.
like it because it's all right there and I know exactly what I'm going to get when I open a certain server. I know what I'm looking for. I know who I can DM after I've cultivated those relationships. I think that it is a little bit hard to prove value from a metrics perspective. And maybe that's me being a complete noob and not digging into Discord metrics as much as I could. But there's not much individual like metrics. Like you can't just look up a user on Discord and be like, oh, they have these metrics on this server. Like that's not a thing. You can kind of
Mhm.
look overall community health, but you can't really look at top contributors or that. So it's nuanced. I also think that I have learned so much about like specific community moderation over this past year because of Discord than I have
Yeah.
in my entire life. And it's
Really?
cool, but it's a lot. It's a lot of like one-on-one conversations and yeah.
What is your biggest takeaway that you would say, or one thing that you've taken away this past year when it comes to moderation? Because moderation is very important, especially when you're working with it doesn't small communities, big communities, but especially larger communities. What's one takeaway that you can give the audience who is trying to build their own communities or managing their own communities or trying to improve moderation?
That's a really interesting, huh? Let me think about it for a second. I think that I'm relatively new to the space. Never had a
Yeah.
background in community management before, so I definitely shouldn't be treated as an expert. But
Expert, yeah. Yeah.
I think that, group mind and all that is important. So my 2 cents is, no matter how mature you want people to be, they're not gonna you can't change anybody. You can just give them the tools to potentially change themselves. And that's really important. Like you can rage all day on certain things and be like, well, why don't they do XYZ or why can't they see ABC? Doesn't matter. It matters what you put out to your community. Modeling good behavior might not turn around, have a turnaround of like night and day right back to you. But like I think that modeling good behavior is going to pay off in the long run. And I can't give a concrete example, but I can speak to something that I've been dealing with on one of the discords that I help moderate. There were a couple conflicts recently with a couple of the moderation team, and these are folks that are just in the community doing this out of the goodness of their heart, and I'm
Yeah.
incredibly thankful for them. But we had a super user leave recently because he got moderated a little bit, differently than he wanted to be. And it came back to a product. And I told the moderator saying, hey, look, we can't moderate people having opinions about inanimate objects. Like products aren't
Yeah.
people. So when you come at it from a people first perspective, you really have to use those soft skills. You have to understand that they're not going to turn around and model everything you're saying right away. You have to play the long game and just kind of hope for the best. People are going to disappoint you, but people are going to surprise and surprise you. And it's going to be good in the
Yeah.
long run, but damn, you got to put in the work.
You have to. It's very much a almost instinctual thing that you have to do as a moderator, as a community manager. You always have, right, like rules and guidelines that you want your community to follow, but it's not always that cut and dry.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think that it's interesting because you got to meet people where they're at. And if they are off
Yeah.
cam and they are on mute and they're just typing and you're talking, that's weird, but
Yeah.
you got to just meet them where they are because,
We know where they
you
are.
never know what life circumstance they're in and what makes them comfortable. But full circle, the guy came back. He came back, he rejoined the
Oh,
disc
wow.
and it was just
Look at
today.
that.
But yeah, I mean, we just gave him space, we gave him respect, and I laid it all out for him and said, "Hey, people miss you there, but completely respect your time and your bandwidth. So do what you got to do."
Do what you gotta do. Love that. I love that. It was a good full circle story there and a good lesson as well. So that's good to hear. That's good to hear. I have a couple more questions for you. before we start to close things out. The first one being there's going to be community managers that hear this from other industries. And I know you're very big into creating authentic learning content and learning communities. So, whether it be in your industry, the media or other industries, like what would be your advice on building educational programs at scale and really nurturing people who are either beginners, intermediate, or experts, or just trying to learn a topic? What would be your advice on building educational programs at that scale?
Yeah. So I'll use our creators program as I think it's really healthy. I think it's really positive. I also don't think it scales. It's pretty small. I think we've got
Yeah.
all in all, maybe 15, 20 folks that we've engaged with over the years to create content for us, animation, modeling, rigging, all sorts of other stuff. But I think that, I mean, you look at the startup scene sometimes and you say, what makes a good startup? I have no idea, but I've heard that some startup founders are like, I don't want to scale because they don't want to lose that nimbleness, that ability to have touch points with the folks you collaborate with and have them be authentic, have them be able to just hop on a call with somebody that you're literally not even working with in the next 2 months and just talk it out
Yeah.
for 20 minutes. I just did that with one of our creators on Monday. I said, "Hey, look, I know we've engaged with you a couple months ago. We're not looking at you for this program. I know we were talking about it, but we're going to go a different way. But also, how was that event that you went to? What are you looking at for next week? How's the recording going for this other thing we just paid you for? Like, just having the ability to jump on those calls and um, have that one-on-one touch point is super important.
Yeah.
Um, I think that something that I struggle with, not to say that we don't do a good job at here, but I do struggle with it almost every time, is reporting out. I feel like, especially at a company this size, 20,000 people, I say 20, it's like 12,000 and then 8,000 contractors or something.
Contractors.
But
Yeah.
it's a big company and reporting out is such a dance because we want to show value. Obviously, we're spending money on this stuff. So we want to make sure that it resonates not just with our audiences, but internally too, and making sure that you have visibility to the execs and all of that little dance. But but that's what I struggle with is saying, okay, it's that dual touch point of saying, okay, I aligned with our marketing messaging, our product messaging, all of this good stuff. Now I got to turn it around and tell a tight little story on Slack, that cool sweet spot with like 3 bullets, 2 lead-in sentences, and
Dude,
a couple
yep.
images. We all know it. We all dread it, and we have to do it to prove value. So I think that, get your formula straight. And sometimes it's rinse and repeat, but you got to do it because otherwise those execs don't see you. And then your boss can't advocate for you because everybody doesn't have visibility into your work. So it's important.
You're preaching to the choir, man. You are preaching to the choir. I think what you said is gonna resonate with a lot of community managers because they don't, like you said, always know the work that we do and having to report out is super important so that you have that avocation later on. So the way you broke that down, I was literally just nodding my head. I feel this completely 100%.
Well, I would say
Um,
that I know that your company is a data-driven company. I
yeah,
don't actually know that, but every company says that, right? And that is the deal breaker when you're a
yeah,
community manager, because you know that the true value that you bring to the table is these really authentic, really powerful stories.
yes.
Where are the metrics in that?
And
So
that's the thing, because especially with the brands that I work with, won't name them, but they wanna see growth. They wanna see because community management is not just about how big the community is. It's about, like you said, the stories, the people, the actual influence that you're creating inside those communities and an impact that you're bringing. But how do you quantify that? Like you just said, It's not just about, oh, how's our engagement rates? Oh, how have we grown to X amount of people yet? Oh, we're trying to be bigger than this company or bigger than this community. Can we do this in a 6-month time frame? Yeah, theoretically we can, but what kind of community do you want?
I guess a little bit more on that, just because I keep on thinking back to my days on Instagram. Like,
And
your community is a reflection of what you put out. So if you're trying to build an audience and like I'm on Instagram, say, and I host a bunch of giveaways, I'm training that audience to expect that from me. So if
yeah,
I, blow up a couple of my giveaways and I get, 10,000 followers or something over the course of X amount of months, and I'm like, sweet, that's awesome, super excited. Now I can pivot and start doing more long form. So it's
yeah,
kind of this give and take and seeing what kind of audience do you want to have versus like what kind of form offers the true value to you and the company that you represent. So I think it's very nuanced.
yep, yep. And I think even people who aren't community managers by profession, but want to grow their own communities, whether they're founders or startup founders, that question that you just asked, what kind of community do you want? It should be the first question. Yeah, we talked about a lot today. This has been amazing. This has been a great first episode. And I want to close it out with this question which is if you could change one thing about how companies, I guess we just talked about it, but there may be other things on your mind, I'm sure. But if you could change one thing about how communities or companies approach community management, what would it be? What would you change? What do you see the future of this space going, especially with an increasingly digital world? Was there anything that you see changing or you expect to change, or would you like to see change? You can answer that however way you want to.
Yeah, I think I did answer it in so many words in that just
Yeah,
don't treat people like a metric, man. Like it's not that hard.
that's it.
Just
That's it.
people like people and really, really listen to them. So I think the way I see this community management going in the future, who knows? I hope that it doesn't get AI'd into the ground. That AI should be treated like a tool, just like any software and any computer. You can't really
100%.
take that human touch point out of it, or else all you're gonna get is metrics, and you might not like what you find. Your community isn't gonna engage with automated soulless content or touch
Exactly.
points. Yeah, I don't know. We'll see.
Hagen, this has been fun. I think this was a good one. I think people are going to get a lot out of this conversation. If people want to follow you, what's the best places that people can find you?
Just hit me up on LinkedIn. My art is a separate thing, so I won't even get into that. But yeah, Brandon, thank you so much for inviting me, and I really appreciate you putting your trust in a stranger, just having me on the
Of
podcast.
course.
It's super cool.
I know I loved your energy from the job and it resonated in the show. And I'll definitely have to have you back on in the future just to catch up and talk more about what we're seeing and new opportunities that have come our way. I've definitely enjoyed this. We got to circle back soon.
Sign me up.
Man, what a great conversation with Hagen. Once again, I appreciate him for stopping by and can't wait to have him back on. Stay tuned for more guests that are becoming on the show on a weekly basis to talk all things community management across various industries. If you're watching on YouTube, please subscribe and leave a like and also leave a comment if you learned something new. How do you think AI, for example, is going to continue to change the world, not just community management? If you're looking to future proof your community career and stay ahead of the curve, hear from all the different insights that I've been receiving from the community managers I've been talking to, please sign up to my newsletter. It's at thecommunitymanagerspodcast.com. I'm capping it at 500 people to keep it exclusive and build a tight-knit community of community managers across the world, so you don't want to miss that. Once again, I'm your host, Brandon Iverson, here at the Community Managers Podcast. And until next time, have a good one. Peace.